One of the most important updates from the past 70 years is that we humans are not alone in the universe. Even science cannot deny that somewhere in the vast galactic outer space, extraterrestrial life exists. More and more scientists are revealing information about UFOs. The most recent international forum to include facts and hypotheses on this topic was held in Sofia. The conference was titled Contact with Extraterrestrial Civilizations, the Future of Mankind and the Paradigm Shift.
I've reached 4 major conclusions about flying saucers. See, all flying saucers are UFOs, not all UFOs are flying saucers. 1, the evidence is overwhelming that planet Earth is being visited by intelligently controlled extraterrestrial spacecraft. In other words, some UFOs are alien spacecraft. Most are not, I don't care about them. 2nd, we're dealing with what I, as half American, half Canadian, would call a cosmic Watergate. That is to say, some few people within major governments have known since at least 1947 that indeed some UFOs are extraterrestrial spacecraft. The 3rd conclusion is there are no good arguments against the first 2. And the 4th is we're dealing with the biggest story of the past millennium. Visits to planet Earth by aliens, successful cover-up of the best data, bodies, and wreckage for 70 years. It's time that our children grow up knowing the truth about where we fit on the scale of things. And it's not at the top of the heap.
In 2013, I was invited in Washington, D.C. by an official parliamentary commission of the United States who was investigating about the UFO problem all over the world. They saw that their government did say nothing to them. So they decided to do something, and they invited 40 experts from all over the world to have for a week a panel and a congress about this. I represented Italy, and what is important are the conclusion of this of the works of this week. New York Times reported that at the end of this meeting, the conclusion was that UFOs exist as a definite material reality, that they are controlled by some kind of intelligence, that their nature is technological, that their nature is technological advanced, and that their origin cannot be found anywhere in the earth. As a conclusion, this commission suggested that the United Nations will have to face this problem. Of course, this is not a particular result, because you know that the United Nations have a limited power, but this is important as a conclusion. It was made with 10 other people. We were 11 in 1978, also with a university professor with us, people of 3 different nationalities in that occasion, and for 3 hours, so it's a long period of time, we observed near Perugia in central Italy, between midnight and 3 in the night, at least 12 or 13 lights moving in a completely irregular way in the sky, but when we tried to leave in 3 different occasions, strangely the lights were nearer to us, like to show themselves. And the next day we went on the spot to see if there could be any other explanation for this. Obviously no, but we had the occasion of another sighting, this time in broad daylight, an elongated object like a cigar passing over our heads. Consider that in that period we had a lot of sightings. Everybody more or less saw this problem, this phenomenon in Italy in that year. Consider that we even photographed the object.
You have the pictures?
Yeah, not here, but in any case, we photographed it, but from a scientific point of view, consider that it was night. So you just see a dot of light against the night. It's hard to do anything with something like this. It is just for us to show that we had no hallucinations.
Legitimate objection to a document, to release of a document, is that of national security. That's the only reason you can hold it back. Well, I think the government is concerned about several things. One is the technology. We have wreckage from Roswell, and there are other wrecks. We're not going to release what we've learned from that unless our opponents on the planet release what they've learned, and there's no signs of that. There is also a problem with people in power don't want to give up power. Remember, this planet has loads of countries, almost 200 countries. Nationalism is the only game in town. If we start thinking of ourselves as earthlings, which we are, somebody's going to lose power. The people running these little countries. The President of the United States doesn't speak, or the President of the Soviet Union doesn't speak for the planet. So there are religious reasons. There are some religious people who say all this UFO stuff's the work of the devil, who would be very upset, you know. So it's going to take some changing of minds and attitudes, but it's happening.
I became interested in this problem during the last 50 years. And in this period of time, I had relationships with governments, with official commissions, with also a lot of witnesses. In 3 different occasions, I had also the opportunity of seeing the subjects. But after all, there was nothing particular, because, for instance, this happened in 1978, in which in Italy we had 2,000 sightings officially listed by our government. This caused our government to face the problem, and presently the Italian Air Force has at least 500 official cases in its archives.
Stanton Friedman's latest book is titled Fact, Fiction, and Flying Saucers. The readers are presented with evidence that a significant amount of data has been intentionally hidden from the public in the USA.
We found, for example, that somebody who was a professor of astronomy who had been saying there's nothing to flying saucers. It turns out, I was able to discover that he had a longer continuous connection with the National Security Agency that nobody knew about until after he was dead. I looked at correspondence and so forth. And that he was a world-class cryptologist. Nobody knew that. And he was a good friend of Dr. Edward Condon, who was involved with the Condon study of flying saucers. And we were able to demonstrate things that were said that didn't make any sense, that shouldn't have been said by scientists. Also includes, I did a whole book about Operation Majestic 12, a group ostensibly set up by President Truman in response to the Roswell incident. I'm the original civilian investigator of the Roswell incident. And the Dr. Condon spent $500,000 of public money on a big study, supposedly nothing to flying saucers. And then you find out that a special UFO subgroup of the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics, they concluded that 30% of the cases he looked at couldn't be identified. He made it sound as if everything's taken care of. And he even said that no advanced alien craft will come to this planet for 10,000 years. Ridiculous comment, you know. And then on this Majestic 12, one of the big debunkers in the United States, a man named Philip Klass, a senior avionics editor for Aviation Week and Space Technology, respectable writer. But it's typical. We had some documents and he said, oh, they're obviously fraudulent because look at the typeface. It's the large pica type, and the National Security Council used only small elite type, and he had 9 documents to prove it. He challenged me to find any other documents done with the same size and style type. And he'd pay me $100 each up to a maximum of 10. Well, I was going to the Eisenhower Library. Anyway, I found 14 documents done in the same size and style type as this supposedly phony document. And I made copies, gave him an invoice. He said a maximum of 10 he'd pay me for. I sent him an invoice for $1,000 and he paid me. But he told nobody about paying me. And I found out later he had never been to the Eisenhower Library, where I went and easily found 14 in a hurry. It turns out they have 250,000 pages of National Security Council documents. And he had the gall, without ever having been there, to say this typeface is wrong. Now, he got very angry when I published a copy of his check in one of my books. It's in here too, as a matter of fact. But the point is that the debunkers are not being rational, scientific, careful researchers kind of thing. Also, we take note in this book of an extraordinary statement made by an Air Force general who, because of Dr. Condon, who recommended closing the Air Force Project Blue Book, that was supposedly the American group concerned with UFOs. And Dr. Condon recommended Blue Book should be closed. So a general, Air Force General, Carol Bolender, was asked, what should we do about Project Blue Book? And he wrote a memo, which we didn't see until 10 years later, in which he said reports of UFOs which could affect national security are not part of the Blue Book system. The Air Force was saying, they're the only group concerned with UFOs, there's no national security problem here. And he also said that if we close Project Blue Book, the public won't have any government agency to report UFO sightings to. However, as previously noted, reports which could affect national security will continue to be investigated using the procedures designed for that purpose. Extraordinary statement. Supposedly the closing of Project Blue Book meant that was the end, government's not doing anything about UFOs. And here we have, I decided I ought to talk to General Bolender. I located him, called him, talked to him on the phone, explained that I'd had a security clearance for 14 years, read his memo with great interest, and I said, it seems to me like you're saying that there are 2 separate communication channels for UFO reports. One for reports that could affect national security, and I told him about one I'd had 2 weeks earlier, where a saucer went down the runway at an Air Force base where nuclear weapons were stored. By definition, that's a national security problem. And I said, on the other hand, if my wife and I see a UFO, big deal, people see them all the time. He said, right, 2 separate communication channels. Extraordinary statement. So we report on that in here, among many other things. So the idea is to update the big picture of what's going on in the background. There are some of the best cases people lied about. We need to be aware of how strong the evidence is that some UFOs are intelligently controlled extraterrestrial spacecraft, and that the government has known about that for a very long time.
If you take 100 cases, you can destroy and not to consider the 80% of this. What is important is the remnant is the rest of more or less 20% who has laws, who has the same manner of manifesting itself, who corresponds to certain objects, certain functions, certain activities, which are all the same everywhere during the last 7 decades. This is admitted openly by a lot of scientific commissions and even authorities. So it is not longer possible to be skeptic about this. The data are here and there is nothing to do. The problem is to interpret them and to use the right interpretation for the benefit of people. They are official documents from governments. They are desecrated. Personally, as far as the Italian government is concerned, I am one of the guys who had the access to definite files which are unidentified, and they are there. The same in the United States, the same in the United Kingdom, the same in France. The French state studied officially this problem since 1977, and they put online 1,700 official cases. They are all unidentified. Today, nobody can be skeptic. Otherwise, it will be ignorant in the sense that he simply is not documented.
So these documents are not falsified?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. Of course, there are a lot of false documents, obviously. But your problem, you see, it's like money. We have the existence of false money, but this does not show that the good money does not exist.
I read my first book about UFOs in 1958, a long time ago. And I gave my first lecture in 1967. In 1978, I was giving a lecture at a Louisiana State University. I was in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, doing 3 interviews at a television station to promote my lecture that night at the university. And the first 2 reporters, we did the interviews. The 3rd reporter was nowhere to be found. So I'm sitting there with the station manager. He's giving me coffee. He's looking at his watch. He knows I have other things to do. He knew the people that brought me to the station. Out of the blue, he says, "The guy you ought to talk to is Jesse Marcel." And brilliant investigator that I am, I said, "Who's he?" His next sentence changed my life. He handled wreckage of one of those saucers you're interested in when he was in the military. What? Where's this coming from? He was not joking. There was nobody around. He was not making a joke. They're old ham radio buddies. He told me he lives in Houma, Louisiana. The reporter showed up. I did my thing, gave the lecture that night. The next morning I was at the airport early, so I called information and talked to Jesse Marcel. And he told me a story. He was the intelligence officer for the most elite military group in the entire world, the 509th Bomb Group. I say that because they're the ones who dropped the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. There was nobody else who had atomic bombs at that time. He was the intelligence officer for that group. They were based in Roswell. And he gets a call from the sheriff that a rancher had come in with some very strange wreckage. So he went to look at it. His boss told him, take our counterintelligence corps man and follow the rancher out. He said, there's loads of this stuff out there, weird material. This is in the middle of nowhere. New Mexico's got a lot of empty land, desert kind of land. So they went out, they saw the wreckage spread out, brought it back in. He was told by his boss, Colonel Blanchard, who went on to be a 4-star general and was Vice Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force when he died of a massive heart attack. This was not somebody who was just nobody, he's an important man. So Colonel Blanchard sends him and the counterintelligence corps guy out to the debris field. They follow the rancher back. They bring some of it back. then he gets told by Colonel Blanchard, take one of our B-29s, fly it to our headquarters in Fort Worth, Texas. He does that. When he gets there, General Roger Ramey, who was Colonel Blanchard's boss, tells him, you don't say anything, I'll take care of it. And he tells the media, the guys who were making photographs, that it's just a weather balloon radar reflector. This is after a story had gone out saying flying saucer captured on ranch in Roswell region. Well, I do have documents. I have been to 20 archives, and I have the National Security Agency, for example, because of a Freedom of Information Act suit through the courts and so forth. Eventually, it took years, released 156 pages of top secret Umbra UFO documentation. There was one little problem. You could read one sentence per page. Everything else was whited out. The CIA, first they released 900 pages, almost all blacked out, up through secret. We did more effort, and eventually they released dozens more copies of top secret Umbra documents about UFOs, all blacked out. And some pages you could read 5 words. So that helps prove the cover-up. But the study that really got me moving on this was entitled Project Blue Book Special Report number 14. Biggest study ever done for the United States Air Force. I found it at the University of California, Berkeley Library. I'd read 10 books about UFOs. None of them had mentioned them. And here was this report. 200 charts, tables, graphs, and maps. I was in data heaven. But I was surprised by 2 things. It hadn't been mentioned in any of those books that I had read, which seemed strange. And there was the press release issued by the Secretary of the Air Force in 1955 when the study was finished. There were several special things. The title of the report isn't given in the press release. You would expect it to be given. Blue Book Special Report 14. What happened to 1 through 13? If it wasn't mentioned, nobody could ask that question. Secondly, they quote the Secretary of the Air Force saying, on the basis of this study, we believe that no objects such as those popularly described as flying saucers have overflown the United States. Even the unknown 3% could have been identified as conventional phenomena or illusions if more complete observational data had been available. That sounds very straightforward, but I had to report the unknowns weren't 3% or 6% or 12%, they were 21.5%. And they were completely separate. There was a separate category. There is one case, the famous abduction of Betty and Barney Hill. There was a star map observed. I was the first to publish about that star map, and that tells us where those particular beings came from. Zeta 1 and Zeta 2 reticuli in the constellation of Reticulum. Can't see them from here, you have to go below the equator. It's only 39 light years away, which is just down the street. And interesting, those 2 stars are only 1/8 of a light year apart. They've got next door neighbors. Our star, the sun, is out in the boondocks. There's nobody close. So it would not be surprising if interstellar travel was developed earlier, where you have a next door neighbor.
Not only is mankind watching the sky waiting for interstellar visitors, but it persists in its attempts to finally find extraterrestrial life in the vast universe.
The story is rather long. It began in 1975, when I was still young, and at our Center of Observation and Receiving of Signal from Planet of Venus was in work with communication with the systems that was intended for investigation of the planet. At that time, many spacecraft were sent to Venus, and our interest to Venus was dictated by the physical property of this planet, that it is very much alike as our Venus, as our Earth, nevertheless, it has absolutely different physical condition. The mass is approximately the same as the mass of Earth. The origin, we believe, is the same as the origin of Earth. The story of it, evolution, but evolution resulted in quite different ways. We have many water on Earth. Oceans are covering 72% of surface of Earth. But on Venus we have no water at all, as temperature is exceeding all levels at which water in liquid state can exist. So there is no water at all. Because it, no oxygen in the atmosphere. There is, of course, very strange thing that temperature is about 500 degrees of Celsius. 500 degrees of Celsius, if you add 100 more, then you see that everything is red by emission. That's why existence of life of Earth type, so-called carbonous and water-based life, is impossible to meet on Venus. Besides it, the pressure is fantastically high. Atmosphere consists mainly of carbon dioxide, and and no oxygen is present there. Then, why imaging of Venus was put as one of the main tasks at that time? It was time of the Cold War, and each of leading world power decided to make presentation of their possibility, of their way how to investigate something and something. I suppose I have shown in my presentation photos of authors of TV experiments, and why you have decided to do so have I asked them one time. No, the answer was, it was not our decision. It was decision of president of Soviet Academy of Sciences. At that time it was Keldysh. He was very powerful person, very powerful scientist. He was a person who was able to take decision and to push this decision across the government. So it was just his idea. And first of all, in the first panoramas that we got from the surface of Venus, it was 1975, we see that surface of Venus is Earth-like. Stones, dust, many features that we see everywhere on the surface of Earth. Nobody was thinking at that time about the possible life on Venus. Then you may remember that at that time personal computer were still not able to have, and processing of data were made by rather primitive means. At that time, nevertheless, they have published everywhere. It was sensation. All newspaper, all magazine, all around the world published this data. Scientists have extracted from their data about state of surface, that it is solid, that if something heavy is put on surface, it exists in normal way. So gradually interest of Venus was going down, and finally it was restored after new Soviet landers that was called Venera 13 and Venera 14. It was 1982, when they have already made color TVs with very good resolution at that time. You know that normal TV, recently when it was analog TV, it was 625 lines. They made 1,000 lines, nevertheless the line were short. So they have made very good images, color, it was republished again, new investigation of it. Together with this investigation of composition of atmosphere, of making, of producing of small constituents of atmosphere were made. I have not mentioned that in previous not success missions, Venera 11 and Venera 12, were made also many interesting discoveries. For example, before it, I was thinking why small constituents, like not common for atmosphere of Venus, not common for atmosphere of Earth, could appear there. For example, ozone. You know, ozone. As soon as thunderstorm appears, you can breathe and feel that there is ozone. Ozone is produced by lightning, and I tried to put there a special instrument, so-called groza. I don't know in Bulgarian. Groza is thunderstorm. Yes. So I called my instrument. And the instrument registered many strokes of lightning. So it was the first time when on spacecraft investigation of electrical activity of atmospheres of Venus and other planets was made. Now it is standard procedure for Titan, for Mars, for all other planets. They put instruments for investigation of electrical activity. So, and as soon as we arrived to some conclusion about it, of course, we need to put more and more instrument and more way of investigation of the planet. By the way, I should say that it is a widespread opinion that as soon as we put some instrument for investigation, we get the answer. No, it is wrong. The more answer we are getting, the more question appears again, you see? And one of them is just connected with our finding of life. Later, maybe at the beginning of 2005 or something like this, new ways of processing of images appeared. At that time, progress in processing was very fast and very active. So we tried to apply these ways to our investigation, to our images. At that time, we had in hand 42 images obtained by all spacecraft on Venus. And we saw that it is something very much surprising in this detail. New we arrived to this data, and then we have found first absence in first images, then appearance on some detail on the next, and again absence on something like this. First, we supposed that it is some part of the spacecraft detached from it, crashing from it. But you see, the physical conditions are so that as soon as something is destroyed in the spacecraft, it is not able to continue its work, as the temperature and high gas penetrating to it destroy electronic immediately. Now we are thinking, and maybe I have not mentioned about it, and maybe it is interesting to say, we are thinking about the next mission now. It is called Venera D, and we are dealing, and we're trying to do this experiment together with American scientists. Last week they have been at our institute, and we try to understand what is possible to do. Why I have remembered about it. As electronics now is so that it is possible to withstand this condition. You can put your camera at 500 degrees, it works, you see. Now, memory, radio system, and so on, now it's possible to produce like this. At that time, it was not so. That's why, as soon as we see these results, we processed it, see new and new features that seems were very strange, and go to, first we go to, I went to my friend, academician Rozanov. He at that time, he was director of paleontology. Paleontologists are people who are able, even by small signature of something found in digging, for example, digging some areas, they are concluding about existence of life long ago on Earth. So I tried to attract their attention. Or they say, it is impossible. It is impossible that temperature. So finally, two groups appeared. One is supporting our investigation no, and they are growing more and more. And another says, oh, it is nonsense, it is impossible. Sometimes we are getting from different editions of magazines this answer, it is nonsense, and nothing more. But what is important to say about it? It seems that nature is able to adjust its existence to any condition. You see, for example, Svetozar has shown the tree of evolution of Earth. Maybe you saw it. Life is able to adjust to any condition, to very high temperature. Life is existing even at temperature close to 200 degrees, deep in water, at underwater volcano. 200 degrees, and they are able to exist there. Again, life is able to exist at very low temperature. In Antarctica, temperature is going down up to minus 80 degrees. Still taking these samples into laboratory, we see that microorganisms still are alive. It means that once appearing, the life is able to adjust to any condition. Same question is for me absolutely strange about why people do not find life on Mars. You see, we know that life of Earth type, as soon as it is placed on the surface of Mars, there are some problems concerning ultraviolet, concerning chemical compound in soil. But as soon as the life is able to adjust to any condition, we should find life on Mars. Why we don't see there? It is fantastically complicated question. I don't understand why. But from another side, you may know that people were looking for beginning of 1995 was the first extrasolar planets was found. Before it, we knew only about our solar system. At that time, we knew that there are 9 planets. Now Pluto is excluded for it. Now we have only 8 planets. We knew that planets like this exist, and we truly believe that everything it is like this. Now, when we have more than 3,000 exoplanets and other stars, important is that we never seen anything like Earth. Never. All systems are other. Almost all systems are unstable. Almost systems have quite different structure. We have small planets like Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars inside, and then giants like Jupiter, Saturn, and so far away from you. And many systems in extrasolar planets have just another construction. Giant planets are close to the star. And important is also that many, maybe very large part of the extrasolar planets are orbiting their star in very low orbit. What it means? It means the temperature at main part of the exoplanets is like on Venus, not like on Earth. That's why existence of life at different levels of temperature, of pressure, of cool temperature, and so on, means that we should not concentrate on Earth-like life. Maybe we are very lucky. Maybe we are the exception. Nevertheless, we know very well our type of life. But be very careful to extend this conclusion for all the world. My colleague in Institute of Catalysis, he has found a body or stuff, chemical stuff, that could be used for producing of creature living creature on surface of Venus. It is special material, and it is interesting that at normal pressure and normal temperature, this material is exploding.
Along with efforts of our scientists to find life beyond planet Earth, comes the most important question. When will we finally make contact with extraterrestrial intelligence?
It's a difficult answer, in the sense that up to this moment we had no contacts from these presences. Why? Well, a good answer could be this. When we, as anthropologists, are facing, for instance, the contact with an inferior culture, what do we do? Nothing. We respect that culture, because if we are involved in it, we changed it, and it will be a disaster for them. If we make a comparison, probably we are in the same situation. A contact, if it is not prepared, would be disastrous for us, because a lot of elements would crumble. As a sociologist, I tell you that this is called in sociology anomia, anomy, which is the destruction of the reference values. If this happens, a culture disintegrates, and this has not to happen. If these people understand the situation, surely will contact us only in the moment in which we will be able to have this contact without problems. I think that this is a good answer. It was Carl Gustav Jung's answer, and today we see more and more that things are happening apparently in this direction.
If we make a contact with extraterrestrials, they might solve our two energy problems. One is the external energy. This means the problem with gas and coal consumption, as well as the nuclear energy. They can give us hints on how we could use the energy from the cosmos without causing any harm to nature. Someday, we will eventually run out of petrol and coal. The other problem is that the fossil fuels emit harmful emissions in the atmosphere, including carbon dioxide and hydrogen sulfide. If we find a way to solve this problem, we will protect the environment and avoid the disaster. We should rethink the way we feed the planet's population, our metabolism. Currently for us and our bodies, it is much better if we consume other animals, since they are easier to digest. There is a huge opposition against GMO foods, but probably a bit more reasonable approach to these genetically modified foods holds the key to our future, because we can't rely entirely on animals and plants that live on our planet. Those who fly above us have already solved this problem, because after all, you can't explore the vast universe carrying a truckload of food behind you. Otherwise, for a single flight of a 5-member crew to Mars, we will be forced to attach a huge installation 10 to 15 times bigger than the spacecraft itself. All of this makes us realise that the extraterrestrials have found a way to eliminate the problem. As I already said, the population of their planet is 22 billion, so they obviously don't have a problem feeding it. I call these two problems internal and external energy. Not that we will mess with nature, but currently this is much more convenient for us. These two ideas that will lead to paradigm shift will change our way of life, not to mention the physics, the science, the society.
Probably for general people, the changing will not particularly definite, but it will be a tremendous change for authorities. Consider that if people will be informed that superior beings who never showed a negative attitude are here, and probably are here, not now, but even before, well, who will be interested in following the indications of our authorities? Nobody. Everybody who look at these newcomers has the possible solution of everything. And this is probably the main reason by which the United States government is so definitely close about this, because they are afraid to lose the world predominance all over the world. Because this will happen, obviously. For general people, well, okay, there are extraterrestrials, okay, let's see what they have to say to us, that's all. But for authorities, no, it's a little different.
It turns out that Americans and Russians have already established contact with extraterrestrials and have borrowed technologies from them. But they don't share information with anyone. The humankind is slowly starting to realise this. We have been forced to believe, mainly through the movies, that the extraterrestrials are cruel and evil, and at the same time, behind the scenes, behind the back of humanity, there have been lots of sharing and negotiating. People realise this because after all, there is no point for an extraterrestrial civilization to act aggressively and attack us, since it is so difficult even for a simple life to appear in the universe. Not to mention a spirit or a mind. What is the point of coming to our planet just to kill off a ready-made product like our civilization?
And finally, what is the biggest UFO-related challenge our humankind is faced with?
I think the biggest challenge for all of us is to see ourselves in a new light, to recognize that we are not the big wheels in the neighborhood. We're not at the top of the heap. We're not the most advanced civilization around. I mean, thank goodness there will be others besides us. How do we look to somebody else, a primitive society whose major activity is tribal warfare? In World War II, we killed 50 million of our own kind. We destroyed 1,700 cities. This year, the military budget on planet Earth is $1 trillion. Many children died of needless starvation yesterday, and the day before, and the day before that. Spending $1 trillion on war, even if we're not fighting a lot of wars at the moment, is not very sensible. Let's hope others have figured out a better way to get along with each other. Now, I never hear anybody saying we can't be the only ones. Everybody realizes it's very unlikely that we're the only ones. So, I'm still an optimist. I hope my great-grandson grows up in a world in which everybody is aware that we're part of a galactic neighborhood.